now I would like to have a look at the more sharp lines which arise from dxc4, where black decides to hang on his extra pawn. So first of all we go bishop g2, logical move, and now one possibility is to play b5. And this allows white to play a move like knight e5 here, making use of the fact that the knight on b8 is still on its initial square. In later parts we will have a look at lines with knight bd7, where white doesn't have the possibility of making this move with a knight. So here black has two main options. First of all, he can play a move like a6, strengthening his queenside structure. But another move first I would like to have a look at is the move knight d5, stopping the bishop exerting pressure on the c6 pawn. And well, right now white has some possibilities, and of course he can castle kingside, for example, but then after a move like f6 it's not so entirely clear what white should do, what kind of compensation he has, as having the pawn on f6 is not such a terrible weakness. So after knight d5 I think the most principled continuation would be to play e4. After e4 black has some different possibilities here, and let's first have a look at a move which is not so popular, and I will show you why. As after knight f6 a very good move is to play a4 when black has some problems keeping his queenside structure intact, as a6 is not possible because of a takes b5, c takes b5 and knight takes c3, and this is very typical as the knight cannot be taken as the rook on a8 is hanging. So after a4 black should probably play a move like b4, but after knight e2, bishop b7 for example, white regains the pawn on c4. He has a very nice structure and he has regained the pawn, so this looks very nice for white. I'll give you one example, as the game Elisi against Sulashvili in Zurich 2010 proceeded with c5, bishop g5, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop e7, and now white got a very nice advantage by playing knight b5. And here you see that the knights on b5 and c4 are very strong, and black has some serious weaknesses in this camp. Also the pawn on b4 doesn't look so nice. So this is clearly better for white. So after e4 the move knight f6 cannot be really recommended. But apart from the main move knight takes c3, which we'll cover later, another possibility could be to play a move like knight b4. So let's have a look at this move. And the most principled continuation right now is to play a3. Well, instead of a3 there is the possibility of castle kingside first, though after knight d7 I'm not entirely sure whether white has sufficient compensation, as black is about to eliminate the knight from e5, after which the knight from b4 can even go to d3 in certain lines. And after trading off some pieces, black is just doing a good job. He can finally complete his development then. So that's why I prefer a more concrete approach with white by playing on a nymph move a3. But on the other hand it allows black to take the pawn on d4 by with the queen, by queen takes d4. And now queen takes d4, there's knight c2, when after recapturing the queen on d4 black will be 2 pawns up, and white definitely doesn't have sufficient compensation. So after queen takes d4 we're gonna continue, we're proceeding with move a takes b4, queen takes e5, and now queen's bishop develops with gain of time. Black's queen has to go to f6, and now a nice move is to play e5, attacking the queen and opening once again the diagonal for the light squared bishop. So let's have a look here. The main continuation is to offer the exchange of queens by playing queen d8. And so far we are following a key game in this line between Tregubov and Pavasovic, played in Kalitea 2008. And in my opinion, I think I found some improvement for white to get some advantage by castling kingside here. And one of the ideas is that if black decides to take on b4, I think white can seize the initiative by playing queen g4, attacking the pawn on g7, and black cannot really castle kingside in view of bishop h6, while another idea could be to continue with moves like rook 81, activating the rook. And here you see that black's queenside is still suffering. They don't have any useful squares to go to yet, and it's pretty hard for black to deal with the pressure. Even though he's 3 pawns up, white has a very nice initiative in my opinion. So after castling kingside, I think that black should play queen takes d1, rook f takes d1, and now after bishop takes b4, I think black has some problems after knight takes b5, as of course if black doesn't take, the pawns on the queen side are becoming seriously weak. White can continue with moves like knight d6, and he will sooner or later pick up the pawn on c4, remaining tremendous pressure along the long diagonal. So after c takes b5, bishop takes a8. I've been analyzing this position for some time, and well, it's not so easy yet, but my general impression is that black has some compensation for the material deficit, but on the other hand, it's not so easy to utilize his queenside majority, and white's pieces are excellently placed and black's pieces are still on their initial square. So I think, and I've asked some confirmation from my good friend and strong grandmaster Luc van Wely, as he also believes that this is favoring white somehow. So this could be some kind of improvement for white upon the established theory. So that's how white should meet the move knight b4. However, more critical is to exchange the knight on c3, which allows white to strengthen his center, as after recapturing it with the pawn on d4 is perfectly protected. And this is another key position in the line with 7 knight e5. And obviously black has some possibilities. And if you're not aware of the theory here, black can easily go astray with a move like bishop b7, which is a terrible mistake because of queen h5. Very nice move, attacking the pawn on f7, while after a move like g6 there's the surprising strike knight takes g6. Of course you cannot take with the h-pawn, so f takes g6 is forced, and now white wins by playing queen e5, attacking both the rook and the pawn on e6, while after rook g8 you can simply take on e6. Well, in some game, there was a game Kekalidze against Shabalov, black played knight d7 instead, and after queen h8 he managed on to win somehow, but objectively speaking black's position is just lost, as white's pieces can quickly get into play by playing h4, h5, or even moves like bishop g5 or bishop h6, so black doesn't have sufficient compensation for the exchange. So instead of bishop b7 there are some other possibilities, and one of them is bishop d6, very active move, which I faced once myself in a tournament game. In that game I took on c6. I thought I had a nice tactic, but after knight takes c6, e5, white is threatening to take on c6, but after bishop b7, e takes d6, I had only counted on the move queen takes d6, after which white seizes the initiative by playing queen g4. He has very nice play here, especially taking into account that black doesn't have his dark squared bishop any longer. So instead of queen d6, which is not very accurate, black played a very good move knight a5, and after bishop takes b7, knight takes, queen g4, castling, bishop h6, queen f6, bishop f4, This was kind of logical sequence. And now black was doing okay in the game Ris against Baghdasaryan in Lvov 2011. And black is just doing okay here. So instead of this line with 10 knight takes c6, much stronger is the move queen g4, in my opinion. Very forcing move, as white takes advantage of the fact that g7 is hanging. So let's have a look at some possibilities here. Of course, castling is not good in view of bishop h6, winning the exchange. And after a move like king f8, white can quickly seize the initiative by castling kingside, queen c7 for example. And now after f4, white gets a very dangerous initiative by building up a strong attack on the king side. And here it's obvious that the king on f8 is not very nicely placed, and black's pieces are still on their initial squares on the queen side. So after queen g4, the critical line is to take on e5, d takes e5, queen d3, and now white can take on g7 right now with his queen, but after queen c3 check, then there's a lot of complications are coming ahead, so this is not entirely clear. I think bishop d2 is the correct continuation here. So after bishop d2, for example, castle kingside, castle queenside, knight d7, bishop e1, and now black should play h5. This is kind of forcing line, and it might seem a bit strange altogether, but it's pretty forced. After queen takes h5, g6. I think white can count on some advantage after queen g5. Nothing can be gained from queen to g4 in view of knight takes e5, queen g5, f6, queen h6, queen e2. And after moves like f4, knight d3, rook takes d3, c takes d3, white doesn't have much more than giving a perpetual check. So that's why the move queen g5 has to be preferred. And after queen e2, I think the best move is rook d2, forcing the queen to go to h5. And after the trade of queens, f4. It's a very complicated position. I would assess white's chances slightly preferable here, although it's not entirely clear yet. For example, knight c5, rook d6, knight d3, king d2, and the king can go to the center, and well, it's very complicated as black has his chances with his pawns on the queen side, but on the other hand, also the pawn on h5 is a serious target, or in some lines white can even consider opening the h-file by pushing h3 and g4. Well, this definitely needs to be tested, but it's a very interesting line. So instead of bishop d6, there's still another option, which is actually bishop e7. So after bishop e7, I would like to present you some model game played between Wang Yu and the Brazilian Grandmaster Alexander Fier, which continued with move a4. There they played b4, castling, castling, excuse me, not castling, black played a5 here right now. And after knight takes c4, b takes c3, queen b3, black cannot take on d4 in view of knight b6 attacking the rook and bishop. So after queen b3, black played bishop b4, and now white played rook d1, castling, bishop f4, knight a6, rook ac1, rook a7. And here this is an interesting moment, as okay, black has a pawn up still, but well, if he can hang on his pawn he will be better, but after white's following move, a very strong move, rook takes c3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, the pawn on a5 is hanging, as white is traveling to take with the knight, followed by taking on c6 with the knight. So knight b4, bishop d6, rook e8, bishop c5, rook d7, bishop b6, queen g5, h4, queen e7, knight takes a5, the knight on b4 is very loose piece as white is about to play bishop c5. And now after knight a6, knight takes c6, white just has an overwhelming advantage. Of course these lines are not forced, but I hope you have gotten some indication of what you can expect in this line after 7, knight e5, knight d5.